Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? Ross Gay is a poet and a writer. You may recognize some of his works. Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, the Book of Delights, Inciting Joy. Perhaps you're sensing a theme. Right? Ross describes himself as curious about joy. He wants to study and understand it. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? Ross was once asked in an interview about his love and curiosity for joy. He laughed. Asked about joy, and his first response was to laugh. Because those most intimate with joy do seem to lead with laughter. The contagious kind, laughter that shakes your belly and rocks your shoulders and beckons others to join, even if they don't know what prompted the laughter in the first place. Deep joy is marked by ready laughter. And Ross Gay laughed when he was asked about joy. And then he shared the source of his laughter, a story from his childhood. He shared that when he and his brother were growing up, they were always tempted by the button in the car that releases the windshield wiper fluid. They always wanted to push it. And so if we think for a moment about that symbol, it has dotted lines coming up and out in opposite directions, representing the wiper fluid that's activated when it's pushed. But that is not the story that Ross Gay's father told. He wanted to discourage his young sons from pushing the button, but instead of saying, no, you may not do that, or I don't want to ever see you pushing that button, instead, he told his boys a story of that picture on that button being a flower, and that if they pushed it, they would turn the family car into a flower. And so they better not push the button. And so just as laughter just filled this sacred space, imagine the laughter that filled the car as the boys were receiving this story, the joy that they marinated in, as they imagined their family car becoming a flower. And then imagine how that joy continued as they grew and became drivers themselves. Unto this day, as quite grown people themselves, every time they go and get their oil changed, imagine the smile and the joy when they're asked if they would like their wiper fluid topped off. Ross Gay is also a gardener. He describes his garden as a mystical space because how could he describe it as anything else? A gardener delighting in crops of vegetables and flowers? Or are they Dodge Caravans? Because some child could not resist the joy of pushing the button. Seemingly simple and yet powerful joy. It reminds me of two other students of joy, so committed to joy that they even wrote a book about it. The Book of Joy, by Archbishop Desmond Tutu and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. If you haven't seen it before, go home today and just search for videos of these two men together. They were infectious in the absolute best way possible. They giggled together, they laughed raucously, they played to the point where they even sometimes frustrate the interviewer or others with whom they're in conversation because they are so deeply joyful in one another's presence. They so deeply love one another's humanity, that it is revealed in their being together. Their time together was a deep song of joy, and that is a song that Archbishop Tutu now shares with all the company of heaven. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? That is the question that the visitors ask of Abraham and Sarah today by the oaks of Mamre. And doesn't that sound like its own mystical space? It maybe even doesn't sound real, the oaks of Mamre. And if we remember that we're in the book of Genesis, then we remember that trees factor as pretty important characters in the book of Genesis. Remember in the beginning, when God comes to speak to Adam and Eve in the garden, in the midst of the trees. Many will remember the old gospel hymn, I think by the same name, In the Garden. And God walks with me and he talks with me. And the what? And the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. So from the beginning, God has come close to us in joy in the mystical space of creation. And our story today is no different. These three visitors are the image of God, God 3 in 1. You have it represented on the front of your bulletin. We marked Trinity Sunday a few weeks ago, but the mystery of God in community is always worth visiting again. Because the mystery of God in community always visits us again and again and again. These three visitors come close to Abraham and Sarah, walking with them, talking with them, tending to their joy and practicing delight in the shade of the trees. And Abraham and Sarah outdo themselves as hosts. Abraham promises the visitors some shade, some bread, a little water, and then he and Sarah prepare and serve a feast. Fresh bread, a fatted calf, curds, and milk. Abraham and Sarah bless these visitors with abundance. Maybe because they sense that their abundance flows from these mysterious visitors, God from whom all blessings flow. Abraham and Sarah offer abundance to the source of all that is, of all that has been, of all that will be. And maybe Abraham and Sarah recognize something of the mystery of these visitors because God has come close to them before. Earlier in Genesis, God calls Abraham and Sarah from their home. God calls them to leave everything that is familiar to them. And God promises that they will know joy and that they will know blessing. And not only that, but God promises them that in their family, all the families of the earth will also know blessing and joy. The promise to Abraham and Sarah is a promise for all of us, for all the families of the earth. And so today, God comes close to Abraham and Sarah again to remind them of that promise. We might imagine the twinkle in these visitors' eyes as they inquire of Abraham, "Where is your wife Sarah?" Because they already know where she is. They know that she's there in the tent. They know that she's listening, and they want her to be. They hope that she is. And so they repeat the promise that Sarah will have a son, and oh, the ridiculous absurdity of it all. And Sarah laughs. Joy and delight at her age. And even if she doesn't intend for the visitors to hear, the visitors do hear Sarah laugh. And maybe it's nervous laughter or laughter in disbelief, but Sarah does laugh. She hears God's promise of joy, and that promise echoes in her laughter. Quiet at first, even fearful, we're told. Sarah was afraid. Can this joy be real? Can this joy really be present? And what might happen if I embrace it? What might happen if I push the button and turn the family car into a flower? And so then this image of God 3 in 1 begins to play and engage with Sarah. They've heard her laughter and they want to confirm it, to amplify it. "Why did Sarah laugh?" they ask. "I didn't laugh," she says. "Oh, yes, you did. You all laughed as it was read. It was beautiful." And this exchange, this conversation, it's meant to be funny. So depending on which characters of comedy you most relate, you can think Carol Burnett in Friends, or Gilda Radner and Jane Curtin and Dan Aykroyd, or maybe Amy Poehler and Maya Rudolph and Steve Carell. Whatever it is, the point is that this is funny. It's funny, it's playful. It's a place of release and joy and creativity. By the oaks of Mamre, God is laughing with Sarah, tending and confirming her joy, delighting with Sarah and Abraham, transforming the first quiet echoes of God's joy and promise in the world into its fullness, into its promise. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? And in time, Sarah's laughter gives birth to laughter. Isaac, whose name means laughter. The blessing promised in Abraham and Sarah begins with joy. It begins with laughter, with delighting in abundant feasts and in fields of Dodge caravans. And this is the kind of laughter and joy and delight that do not ignore the harsh realities of the world, but confront them and defy them. Confront them and defy them like Archbishop Tutu, like the Dalai Lama. This is laughter and joy that motivates towards God's promise. The other thing to know about Ross Gay is that he is the son of an African-American father and a white mother. And his parents were married in the time of Loving versus Virginia. And so Ross and his brother are Isaacs of a sort. Embodied joy, laughing, challenging a world that would deny the dignity of their parents' love and even of their own humanity. As Ross reflects, joy has nothing to do with ease. There is so much lamentable in our world. There was so much lamentable in the world at the time of Abraham and Sarah. So much work to engage so that all the families of the earth can and shall be blessed and experience joy and dwell in delight. Ross Gay says it this way: we forget to advocate for what we love, for what we find beautiful and necessary. We are good at fighting, at being motivated by the anger, and the anger can be good, but imagining and holding in our imagination what is wonderful and to be adored and preserved and exalted is often harder for us. Imagining is often harder for us. And so in response today, a feast is prepared by the oaks of Mamre. And God comes close and laughs and delights with us. God invites our imaginations to the table and promises that laughter is on the way, that joy will be born into the world, that this is God's promise for Abraham and Sarah's family and for all the families of the world. And we can't help but laugh in response, maybe quietly, maybe a bit fearful. Joy and delight, blessing when the world has grown so old and so gray. Yes, God laughs. Yes. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord?